Hi everyone, this is Cooking with Kurt. Today my husband Donald and I are going to show you how to make a caramel cake. This is a yellow chiffon cake glazed with a shiny caramel icing and then decorated with Italian meringue buttercream roses and other decorations.
This recipe was requested by a lot of you and we hope you like this video.
We suggest making this cake over 2 days as there are many steps. The first day we're going to make the yellow chiffon cake and the caramel icing, and on the second day we're going to make the Italian meringue buttercream roses and other decorations. So to start, we're going to make the yellow chiffon cake. Take 8 eggs, separate them into yolks and whites while they're still cold, and let them come to room temperature. Preheat your oven to 340 degrees Fahrenheit, then take 2 9-inch round cake pans and line the bottoms with parchment paper. Do not grease the parchment paper or the sides of the pans. Soak 2 cake strips in cold water for 5 minutes. Then shake off excess water but do not wring, and place these soaked cake strips around each of the cake pans. These wet cake strips will help prevent the cakes from doming while baking. Then take a large mixing bowl and a sieve and add 2 1/4 cups of cake flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, half a cup of granulated sugar, and 1½ teaspoons of salt. Sift these together. Then add in the 8 egg yolks, 2/3 cup of vegetable oil, 1 cup of whole milk, 1½ tablespoons of vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon of finely grated lemon zest, and 1 teaspoon of finely grated orange zest. Beat this together with an electric mixer till the mixture is smooth and well blended. Then take the bowl of your stand mixer, add in the 8 room temperature egg whites and 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Attach the whisk attachment and beat on medium speed until it looks frothy for about 2 to 3 minutes. When the mixture looks frothy, very slowly add in 3/4 cup of granulated sugar while continuing to beat. Adding the sugar too quickly may deflate the egg whites. When all the sugar has been added, turn the speed up to medium-high and beat until you see stiff, glossy peaks, like this. Then 1/3 at a time, gradually and very gently fold this meringue into the cake mixture until they're well combined. Then divide the batter equally into the 2 prepared cake pans. We're going to bake these in our preheated oven at 340 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 to 45 minutes. Or until the cakes are light golden brown and the surface springs back when touched lightly at the center and a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean. Immediately invert them onto metal racks and let them cool for 5 minutes. When the cakes have cooled slightly, lift off the pans. Peel off the parchment paper the cakes were baked with and let them cool down on the racks.
If your cakes are stuck to the pan, just quickly run a knife along the edges of the cake before inverting it. While the cake is cooling to room temperature, we're going to work on the caramel icing. First, measure out 2 cups of heavy cream and let it come to room temperature. Then, in a small bowl, add in 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and 3 tablespoons of room temperature water. Whisk them together so the cornstarch gets dissolved and forms a slurry. Set this aside. Then in another small bowl, add in 1/4 cup of ice cold water and 1 packet, which is about 1 tablespoon, 1/4 ounce, or 7 grams of powdered gelatin. This is the equivalent of 4 gelatin sheets. Stir it into the cold water and let the gelatin bloom for 10 minutes. In the meantime, take a medium-sized saucepan and add in 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar and 3 tablespoons of water. Heat this over medium heat. Do not stir the sugar and water mixture. Just gently swirl the saucepan to make sure all the sugar gets moistened with water and that everything is heating and melting evenly. If you see portions of dry sugar, swirl the saucepan so they get covered by the melted liquid sugar. Bring the sugar-water mixture to a boil and continue heating until it turns into a copper-amber color. Swirl and tilt the pan to melt any sugar crystals that start to form on the sides. With this much sugar, it might take a while to caramelize. Just be patient. It'll get there eventually. Be careful not to let it get too dark, otherwise it will have a slight bitter burnt flavor. When you see a copper amber color, like this, turn off the heat. Then, while vigorously mixing, very slowly add in the 2 cups of room temperature heavy cream, a little bit at a time, while vigorously whisking it in. Be careful of the hot steam from the initial addition of heavy cream. Using room temperature heavy cream and adding it very slowly will help prevent the caramel from seizing up. If the sugar does seize up into a ball, don't worry, just turn on the heat to low and keep whisking and the caramel will remelt into the heavy cream. When the caramel and heavy cream have been incorporated, add in half a cup of room temperature water, the slurry of dissolved cornstarch, and half a teaspoon of table salt, and whisk them in. Turn the heat to medium-low and bring this to a boil while whisking to break up any lumps. Once it starts boiling, continue whisking for 1 more minute till it thickens. Turn off the flame, remove it from the heat, and mix in the bloomed gelatin water mixture and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, whisking to combine. If you notice any lumps, run this caramel glaze mixture through a sieve as necessary. Then measure out about 1 cup of this caramel icing. We're going to place this 1 cup of caramel icing in the fridge for about 20 minutes for rapid cooling. Let the remaining caramel icing rest at room temperature in the saucepan and cool to room temperature, about 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which may take up to 2 hours. Now on a really hot day, you may have to put the caramel icing into the fridge to reach that temperature and firm up. Now luckily it's winter here in New York, so we don't have that problem today.
By the time you're done making the caramel icing, the chiffon cake should have cooled enough to work with. One at a time, transfer them onto a chopping board. Using an 8-inch cake ring, cut the outer edges off the cake to create an 8-inch cake round with straight edges. Do this for both cake rounds. This makes the sizes of both cake rounds uniform and creates straighter edges in the final assembled cake once the caramel icing has been added. Now as usual, you can eat the cake scraps. Now, take a cake board that's larger than 8 inches. We're using a 10-inch cake board. Place a clean and dry 8-inch cake ring in the middle. Take a piece of acetate sheet that's 4 inches high and 26 inches long, and line the inside of the cake ring with the acetate sheet. With the flatter side down, place one of the 8-inch chiffon cakes in the middle of the ring. Then take the slightly cooled 1 cup of caramel icing that was placed in the fridge for 20 minutes and pour it evenly over the first chiffon cake layer and spread it out with a small spoon so that it forms a flat layer of caramel. Then with the flatter side up so the top of the cake is as flat as possible, place your second chiffon cake round on top of the caramel and gently tap it down with your hands to make sure the layers are snug. Place this in the freezer for 2 hours to let the layers firm up and become very cold. Frozen cake surfaces will allow the caramel icing to harden faster once it's added. After 2 hours, when the caramel icing has cooled to room temperature, around 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, take the cake layers out of the freezer, slip off the metal cake ring, and peel off the acetate sheet, revealing the frozen chiffon layers. Now there's a difference between frosting and icing. While frosting is thick, fluffy, and easy to coat with, icings are used to form a smooth, shiny glaze, and they tend to be thinner, glossy, and runny.
Right, and working with this caramel icing can be messy, so set up a revolving cake stand with a baking sheet on it to collect the excess caramel icing. Place a small bowl upside down in the middle of the baking sheet. Then place the frozen cake on top of the bowl, with the cake board still underneath the cake. Pour some of the caramel icing over the top of the frozen cake, letting it drip over the sides. Then use a bench scraper to flatten the top as much as possible so that the caramel forms a nice, shiny, and smooth glaze on top. Then pour more caramel icing on the sides of the cake as needed, and similarly, using a bench scraper, smoothen the sides as much as possible so that the caramel forms a shiny surface. The cold frozen surface of the cake should allow the caramel icing to harden on it quickly. When the cake has a smooth glaze of caramel icing on top and on the sides, use a spatula to clean off the bottom rim of the cake board as much as you can, and wipe off any residual caramel icing as much as possible with a moistened paper towel. Rest this cake in the fridge overnight. Letting this cake rest overnight in the fridge allows for the cake to continue to defrost and for the caramel icing to set. Now on day 2 of making this cake, we're going to make the Italian meringue buttercream. Take 4 eggs and separate them into yolks and whites while they're still cold. Save the yolks to use for another dish, and let the 4 egg whites come to room temperature. Take 2 cups, which is 4 sticks of unsalted butter, slice them into 1-inch cubes, and let them also come to room temperature. Take the bowl of your stand mixer and add in the 4 room temperature egg whites and 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. With the whisk attachment, beat this on medium speed. When the mixture looks frothy, after about 2 or 3 minutes, slowly add in 1/2 cup of granulated sugar. When all the sugar has been added, turn the speed up to medium-high and continue beating till you see soft peaks forming, like this. Let this rest. Then take a medium-sized saucepan and add in 1 cup of granulated sugar and 1/3 cup of water. Heat it over medium-low heat. Without stirring, wait for the sugar to dissolve completely and the mixture looks clear. When the sugar has dissolved, attach a candy thermometer and turn up the flame to the highest level possible. Without stirring, continue heating till the sugar-water mixture reaches the softball stage, which is 235 degrees Fahrenheit. Pay very close attention to your thermometer because if the sugar heats past 235 degrees Fahrenheit, the resulting frosting will be grainy. As soon as the thermometer reads 235 degrees Fahrenheit, turn off the flame and remove the saucepan from the heat. Turn on the mixture on medium-low speed and immediately drizzle the hot sugar mixture into the egg white meringue in a slow, steady stream. The sugar should be hot enough to be in the softball stage so it stabilizes the eggs, as well as hot enough to pasteurize the egg whites so that they are safe to eat. When all the hot sugar syrup has been added, turn off the mixture to scrape down the bowl as needed. Then turn on the mixer back onto medium-high speed and continue running the mixer until the mixture cools completely to room temperature, which could take about 15 to 20 minutes. Don't worry, as you cannot overmix this meringue buttercream frosting. Letting the mixer run allows for the meringue to cool down faster. It should end up having a nice silky smooth texture, and it should be the same temperature as the room temperature butter before they are combined. When the meringue has cooled down completely to room temperature, turn the speed down to medium-low. And 1 cube at a time, add in the 2 cups of room temperature butter, waiting for each piece of butter to get incorporated before adding the next one. If the mixture starts looking curdled, don't worry. It just means the mixture is too cold and it will become smooth once it warms during mixing. Remember, buttercreams cannot be overmixed. Now, if the mixture starts to look soupy, don't panic. This can happen if it's a hot day outside, so simply take the bowl and put it into the fridge for about 20 minutes for the mixture to firm up a bit. Once all the butter has been incorporated and the mixture looks smooth, turn the speed back up to medium-high and add in 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract and 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. Continue mixing the buttercream on medium-high speed for another 5 minutes or until it's well incorporated. smooth, and has a silky consistency. Don't worry about overmixing, as you can't really overmix meringue-based buttercreams.
The first thing we're going to do with the Italian meringue buttercream is to make roses to put on top of the cake. Transfer about 2 cups of the frosting into a separate bowl, which we will color sky blue for the roses. We suggest using gel coloring rather than liquid coloring for a more vibrant color and so the buttercream doesn't get watered down. You only need a few drops of gel coloring. However, the gel coloring is still water soluble, so the fat from the butter, which is hydrophobic or non-water soluble, will not readily take on color from the gel. A trick to get the color to take is heating it a bit. So from the 2 cups of separated buttercream for the roses, take about 1 tablespoon and transfer it into a separate microwavable bowl. Add 1 drop of gel food coloring to this 1 tablespoon of buttercream. Again, we're using sky blue color for the roses. And microwave this 1 tablespoon of buttercream with 1 drop of gel coloring for 10 seconds. Microwaving the small portion will allow the color to take to and more easily dissolve into the buttercream. Once you have this small portion of buttercream with activated coloring, mix it back into the 2 cups of buttercream. Add more or less coloring, 1 drop at a time, using this microwaving technique to achieve the color you want. We're only using 1 drop here for a more natural pastel sky blue color for the roses. Take a piping bag and attach a number 104 petal tip. Fill the bag with some of the blue frosting, or whatever color frosting you're making the roses. I'm using a 3-inch diameter flower nail. Squeeze a little bit of frosting onto your flower nail, and add a 3 by 3-inch square piece of parchment paper onto the nail. With a thicker part of your tip facing down closer to the nail, at a slight angle, form a conical shaped base by squeezing the frosting while turning the nail. I'm just squeezing the bag and holding it steady while rotating the flower nail. Create another small cone on top, holding the tip at a slightly sharper angle. Reinforce the bottom cone by going over the base with another layer of frosting. So now we should have 1 large conical base. On top of this conical base, create the center of the rose by piping a tight circle with a small opening at the top. Again, I'm squeezing while holding the tip steady and just turning the nail. We're going to create 3 layers of petals surrounding the center circle. Create the first layer of petals by piping 3 upside down U-shapes around the center of the rose. Pipe in one direction while turning the nail in the opposite direction. Start each upside down U-shape at the center of the previous U-shape. The second layer will be 5 petals. Using the same technique of piping upside down U-shapes or arches, piping in one direction while turning the nail in the opposite direction, starting each petal in the middle of the previous petal so they overlap. The third and final layer will be 7 petals, using the same technique. Starting each arch in the middle of the previous one so the arches overlap with each other. When your rose is done, slide the square of parchment paper from the nail and transfer it onto a flat surface like a small sheet pan, and store your finished roses in the fridge to firm up while working on the remaining roses. We're going to repeat this to make a total of 7 sky blue roses. Remembering the 5-step process, creating the conical base, then the center of the rose, which is just a tight circle, and the first layer of 3 petals, then the second layer of 5 petals, then the third layer of 7 petals. Then transfer the rose to the sheet pan with the other roses. Store all 7 roses in the fridge till you're ready to use them. You'll have excess frosting so you can practice, and some of the roses can just be for eating. Keep the piping bag with the blue frosting at room temperature since we'll use this again when arranging the roses. Now while the roses are firming up in the fridge, we're going to work on the cake decorations and borders. Take a piping bag and attach a coupler so we can easily switch to different tips. Start with a small round tip attached to the coupler. I'm using a number 2 tip. Fill your piping bag with about 1 cup of plain white Italian meringue buttercream. We're filling the piping bag with only 1 cup of frosting at a time for this to have maximum control when squeezing the frosting. Just refill with more frosting as needed. Place your cake on a revolving cake stand and create a decorative squiggly lace design on the bottom half around the cake. Just have fun with it, as this part doesn't have to be perfect. I'm creating a loopy lace pattern that goes diagonally top right towards bottom left, starting each iteration about 1 inch apart. Doing this around the entire cake. Then create the same loopy lace pattern, this time going bottom right towards top left, again starting each iteration about 1 inch apart. This creates loopy squiggles that have an overall crisscross pattern to them. Now I'm going to switch to a number 6 tip, which is a little thicker, to create a ribbon-like border with subtle up and down indentations halfway up the side of the cake. This is where the revolving cake stand comes in handy. Keeping the tip in the same position and squeezing, rotate the cake stand to help create even intervals around the cake. Next, we're going to make the bottom border at the base of the cake. Switch to an open start tip. I'm using a number 21. I'm creating a simple shell border around the bottom of the cake by holding the tip at a 45-degree angle and squeezing then dragging while releasing, making overlapping shells while turning the rotating cake stand. Do this around the entire bottom of the cake. The last thing we're going to do with this white frosting is to create a border on the top edge of the cake, similar to the ribbon border with indentations halfway up the sides, keeping the same number 21 open start tip. I'm just keeping my tip in the same position and squeezing while rotating the cake stand to help create even intervals. Do this all the way around the cake. Now we're ready to arrange the roses on the cake. Take the piping bag with blue frosting we used to make the roses. Add a small dollop of blue frosting on the surface of the cake where your center rose is going to be. I'm adding extra dollops just to give me a rough idea of the orientation of the other 6 roses. If you need more frosting, you can always add more dollops later. One at a time, use scissors to carefully pick up the rose and detach it from the parchment paper. Place the biggest rose in the very center of the cake. Do the same thing with the remaining 6 roses, adding more dollops of frosting as needed, arranging them in a circle. The final touch to this cake is to create green leaves between the roses. Transfer about half a cup of the plain white frosting into a separate bowl. Add in 1 teaspoon of matcha powder for a natural green coloring. The matcha should readily dissolve in the buttercream, so no need to microwave this time. This also adds just a hint of that delicious matcha flavor to the cake, which complements the salted caramel very well. Take a clean piping bag and attach a leaf tip. I'm using a number 352. And transfer the matcha green frosting into the piping bag. Wherever there are gaps between the roses, create leaves by holding the tip perpendicular to the orientation of the leaf you want, then squeezing while doing a jerking back and forth motion, then releasing, to create texture in the leaves. I'm creating leaves between the outer roses, as well as around the center rose. And that's it. We're done. It's a complicated cake and it's time intensive, but definitely worth the effort. Serve your cake at room temperature. Store leftovers in the fridge and let your cake come to room temperature again before serving for the Italian meringue buttercream to soften up again and for more vibrant caramel flavor. And there it is. A yellow chiffon cake with a shiny caramel icing and decorated with Italian meringue buttercream roses and borders. Ang sarap!
Sarap!
Yum.
Yum.
This cake tastes as good as it looks.
And it's so beautiful. I love that deep and rich salted caramel flavor combined with the silky smooth flavor of the Italian buttercream.
Thank you all for watching. Please let us know in the comment section below if you're planning to make this caramel cake. Send us pictures of your creations on Facebook and Instagram. The links are below. And if you like this video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Cooking with Kurt.
And don't forget to click on the bell so you get notified when we post new cooking videos.
Maraming salamat!